Hello, lovely people, my fellow time travellers. Before I launch into the monologue for this week, I just want to give you a heads up, as I always do, to check out my patreon.com site. If you join up there and part with a bit of cash, you support the series, you make it possible. And you get access to all the new content. You get exclusive access to a question and answer video that we film every week. It's great. Come along, join up, make it even better by being there. Okay, now it's time for my thought for the week. I've been enjoying the sense of freedom, the liberation that comes from letting go of what I thought I knew, if you know what I mean. Like a lot of people my age, I suppose, although not only, people who've spent some time in education, collecting degrees of one sort or another, or, well, as I prefer to see my various so-called qualifications now, pieces of paper rolled up inside cardboard tubes that I cannot lay a hand on. I spent a lot of my time thinking I was understanding what was going on around me. In short, I indulged myself in thinking I was quite smart. Not the smartest, not by any means, not smart enough even to deal with most of the questions on University Challenge, but smart enough for my own purposes. Thought I was doing all right. More recently, I've realised that I'd somehow managed to get through life knowing next to nothing. Well, next to nothing of use. But by now, I've realised that beyond knowing how to read and write, how to touch type, that's very useful for someone like me, and how to drive a car, I really spent 5 decades of my life knowing next to nothing of value to anybody. And let me tell you, once absorbed and accepted, that, what would you call it, self-knowledge is fantastic. It's a fresh start. It gives you everything to play for. A do-over. I've been thinking again about how good it is to be a conspiracy theorist. And I mean that most sincerely. I know a lot of people on the same path as me prefer to modify that label, qualify that label. You talk about how it's about being ahead of the game or knowing things years before the mass of the herd, whatever. I am quite happy with the original label. Say it once and say it loud. I'm a conspiracy theorist and I'm proud. There's a gazillion parts to the big story. A gazillion parts to the truth. The missing story, the hidden story. And that because it's so huge and all-encompassing, that's the basic challenge. There's so much to it. There's so much to learn. While the evidence of the presence among us of a parasite class that's been exploiting, manipulating, controlling, and thereby living off the rest of humanity for as long as there's been civilization or anything approximating civilization is overwhelming. I mean, once you get your eye in, you can see the baleful presence, the baleful influence of the parasite class everywhere you look. Most of us spend, I would say most, if not our whole lives, knowingly or unknowingly, overlooking that which is, once you open your eyes, plain to see. And I speak with even more self-knowledge when I say that at first, if and when it dawns on you that you've been led up the garden path, when it dawns on you, it hurts. It really does. Not physically, so to speak, but, emotionally. And it should hurt. It's downright humiliating to realise and then accept that you've been had, that you've been sold nonsense. there's a sense of wasted time, all those years, blind or asleep, or both. For a lot of people, the pain of accepting the waste of time, the negating of all that so-called education and hard-won wisdom, it's too painful. So better to dismiss the hint of all that alternative truth and carry on as before. But, and it's a big, painful but, if you can, as it were, muscle past the gag reflex and swallow it down, swallow the truth, then a whole new understanding begins to emerge, a whole new world to explore. That's where I am. A veritable stranger in a strange land, and it's an excellent place to be. Join me. Spy Master. That's only one way to describe him. Spy Master J. Edgar Hoover said, the individual is handicapped by coming face to face with a conspiracy so monstrous he cannot believe it exists. Ain't that the truth, J. Edgar? A conspiracy so monstrous. And if you don't care for the thoughts of a character as controversial or indeed compromised, if you like, as J. Edgar Hoover, then perhaps the words of Terry Gilliam might be easier to swallow. Terry Gilliam of Monty Python and the rest. And he said, I don't think you ever learn just one thing. At some point you start unlearning things. I have been working hard to unlearn everything I know. Close quotes. You and me both, Mr. Gilliam. So much has to go in order to make way for the new. A mental decluttering, if you will. You know, do you remember the episode of The Simpsons when Homer Simpson says, every time I learn something new, it pushes some old stuff out of my brain. Remember when I took that home winemaking course and I forgot how to drive? And Marge says, that's because you were drunk. And Homer says, and how? And also, there's so much pride and ego in the way of changing a person's mind, changing your own mind, opening your mind to new and challenging ideas. I think with every passing day, we get stiffer as adults. We get less flexible. Our joints seize up. And it hurts to move. It hurts when you get out of bed. Stuck in your ways, literally. Now, I'm in the mood today, in my ebullient mood. I'm in the mood for quoting other people. So here's another quote. In his poem, If, Rudyard Kipling says that bit about watching, the things you gave your life to broken. And he advises stooping and building them up again with worn out tools. Now, I like that poem as much as the next person, but I'd advise against that bit, that, actually the building them up again bit. I would advise against it if it means by rebuilding, if it means repeating your old mistakes. Seeing it torn down and then rebuilding it just as it was. Recreating the past just as it was, without having learned anything in between. Replicating your misunderstanding of before. I would say that, having watched the things you gave your life to broken, which is to say, taken apart, disassembled, having watched that, you would do better to wonder if those edifices were worth having in the first place. Once they're down, let them stay down. Perhaps those things having been broken down, perhaps that's the right thing. Perhaps that's the best thing that could have happened, because now there's the chance to use the worn out tools, or perhaps some new tools to build something new, something better, something closer to the truth. And honestly, sometimes when I think along these lines, to back reference that idea about me appearing on here always to be miserable, which I'm really not. When I think along those lines, I get a fleeting sensation, at least, that's close to ecstasy. I kid you not. An intense excitement about the potential of the new. Too many people are stuck in their ways to no good end. They're entrenched behind, an understanding that they've invested too much time and effort in building to ever comprehend abandoning now. It's too scary. And this is a predicament for those people, and it only works against those people. It handicaps them. It traps them. And know as well that too many people have too much power to lose. They've got too much invested in the old lies. And so by hook or by crook, they'll keep the old lies going. If you've begun seeing things differently than before, and then when you try and share what you've learned with others around you, if they shout you down, if they call you a conspiracy theorist maybe, then sometimes all you can do in response is to smile, if not outwardly, then inwardly, at the proof that shouting down represents, or at least the possibility that you're doing something right, that their anger in the face of what you're saying is evidence that you're taking flack because you're over the target. You're doing something right. There's another line, another quotation from an English polymath called Herbert Spencer. And he, amongst other things, it was he, not Charles Darwin, who coined the expression survival of the fittest. He was saying that before Darwin. And his quotation in this context is, "There is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation." Often, not always, but often, when you're shouted down and ridiculed for daring to think or say something new, it's because you've come up against precisely what Spencer is talking about, which is to say other people's contempt prior to investigation. Maybe your new idea is right. Maybe it's wrong. Maybe it's somewhere in between. But if those around you treat it with contempt without at least first investigating what you've said, then the problem is theirs and not yours. As I say, sometimes I feel euphoric, briefly euphoric, but euphoric about the potential of new understanding. Sometimes I feel as if I'm on the outskirts, the hinterland of that conspiracy that J. Edgar Hoover talked about. The one so monstrous that too many people refuse even to contemplate the possibility that it exists. I think that monstrous conspiracy is made of many bits and pieces, many parts, too many to list. It's certainly about money and the power obtained and jealously guarded by those in control of money creation and money supply. Henry Ford, I'm quoting people all the time today, as Henry Ford said, "It's well enough that the people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system. For if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." But in that same way that I would modify Kipling's line about rebuilding, putting back what's already been, preferring instead to build something new and better, I would say Ford was wrong, whatever, consciously or not, in predicting popular revolution, because it's my belief that the people never actually revolt. They never have, never will, not in any genuine or meaningful way. The same parasite class that has always run the show might manipulate the mob to get what they want, but the only beneficiaries of so-called revolutions are the parasites and never the mob. They end up dead in the gutter. what I would say is that if and when enough people realise the truth about money, fiat money, money out of nowhere, the power to place the mass of people into debt and keep them there, paying interest on that debt forever, or having their assets taken from them in lieu of that debt. Lose your house, lose your business, whatever. When enough people realise that truth, there will simply be a turning away, a quiet and strong turning away, a walking away, a refusal to comply any longer, a refusal to play that game any longer. There won't be any pitchforks, there won't be any flaming torches, there won't be any blood in the streets. People will just say, that's nonsense. And they will come together to find other ways of doing things. Look, just as a for instance, at what the new Labour government in the UK is saying about what they've identified as a £20 billion black hole in the economy. 20 billion missing pounds. Now, listen to that and know that it's coming from the mouths of the same government that's spending in real time right now, guess what, £20 billion on public sector pay rises and sending money overseas to help third world countries build so-called renewable energy. Oh, £20 billion missing. Yeah, but don't look over here at where we've thrown that. All they're doing is setting the scene to hike taxes in line with their blatant determination, which they've inherited from the previous incumbents. It's not about Labour or Conservative. Uniparty. This is in line with the blatant combined uniparty determination to further immiserate and impoverish what remains of the pesky middle class. In fact, anybody holding on to anything, anybody with any money in the bank, holding any property, with a functioning business, because the government, red, blue, yellow, green, doesn't make any difference. They hate anyone with independent mind. Anybody that thinks that they can, and that can, demonstrably do without the government. They hate that. But as I say, the monstrous conspiracy is thousands of years old, and it's composed of parts that are too many to count. The control of money is only part of it. Look at the fakery around President Joe Biden. President Joe Biden, sharp as a tack, the best version of Biden yet. And then 5 minutes later, they say, oh, he's too far gone. He can't even stay in the presidential race. And laughing gas Kamala Harris is now the great hope. Camelot. You see what they did there? Camelot, and all that jizz. It's a farce. It's a blatant farce. They know we know it's a farce, and they couldn't care less. In fact, they want us to know it's a farce. And by so doing, we're accepting that democracy is as far gone as Joe Biden's brain. As someone interested in history, I look back at so much of what I was taught, at school, at university, and what I thought I knew. I'd taken that all on board, and I thought, I know this is real. And I realised I've been had. Now, maybe, don't get me wrong, I don't mean to be unnecessarily harsh on my teachers and my lecturers, in that I'm making space for the likelihood that the people who taught me were only victims of the same, duped like me, passing it on. They had an incomplete understanding of the truth, which is what I have. Given my own decades of blindness, deafness, and dumbness, I could hardly say that I could hardly claim to have learned much if I was just going to turn around and damn all of those who are still thinking what I used to think. Can't do that. I've realised something, but I can't blame the people that haven't yet. Now, this is a monologue of quotations, and here's another one, this time from an American author, Upton Sinclair, who was, among much else, the Democratic Party nominee for Governor of California in 1934. He said, "It's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it." That's the truth. But for my own part, I look again at so many aspects of how I used to view and thereby hope to understand the world. I used to look at things archaeological, for example, or at the conventional history of the 17th century, the 18th century, the 19th century, the 20th century, the 21st century. I look again and I think again. I spend my days now, or at least, more of my days than I probably should spend, reading. I read widely. Old books, books that I pick up in second-hand shops. I read more widely than I used to. I read books by authors that I had not previously even encountered. Authors who are a long way from the mainstream. They ain't on any Sunday Times Waterstones bestsellers list. I read what they have to say, and I wonder. As I say, it's been an exceptional experience so far. To say my horizons have broadened is, as they say, putting it mildly. Some people listening to this, if they do, will shake their heads and dismiss me as just another conspiracy theorist. Well, if you do, you're damn right I am.